We painted the helo up a week or two before Christmas, and then that week we used it to fly some ice cream out to the troops in the field. And then early Christmas Day, we had a party for some Vietnamese orphans at the officers club, and we flew Santa in at the party and had gifts for the kids and took care of them there at the thing. And we also used it to fly Bob Hope around when he was there for Christmas of '69. We painted a snow cap on top of it. The cabin itself was red with stars and sprinkles on it, and then the tail boom was candy striped. I don't know if Mom sent it to me or if I went to the PX there and bought it, but I put up a small Christmas tree with lights in my quarters, and the three of us living there together had our own little Christmas celebration, and and we just recognized it. Yes, it's Christmas season and we're here, but just because we're not home doesn't mean we can't celebrate Christmas.
At that setting, at that time, there's no sanctity, no religious faith involved. You put somebody in a suit, you fly them in on a helicopter, and that's Santa. That was even more fake than what we see here.
Was there any sense of celebration at all?
Well, he would walk around to where people were gathered and give them some kind of gift and say Merry Christmas. And he was there like 30 minutes and back on a helicopter.
Wow. Apart from that, was there really any difference between Christmas and any other day when you were in
No,
South Vietnam?
we still went out and did patrols and stayed on guard duty. And
It was kind of just a normal day. We declared a stand down day as far as the war was concerned, not just at my air base, but across the American forces. And so we were not flying that day, but we were on high alert because we expected the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese troops to not respect Christmas. Obviously, it wasn't their holiday.
Right.
So we were just kind of hanging around. Uh, my roommate in our little trailer had discovered a small Christmas tree in a corner, which about a week before Christmas, so we had decorated that. And then on Christmas Eve, there were a couple of us that took it upon ourselves to try to spread Christmas cheer amongst the security forces and other people that were on duty securing the base. So we got the squadron truck and drove it around to the perimeter and sang Christmas carols as best we could to the bunkers. And we actually went up in the control tower and surprised the air traffic control operators that were there with our rendition of Silent Knife and Bless You, Merry Gentlemen, and so on. Most of it was horribly off key, I will tell you, but we kind of had fun doing that, and maybe we brightened their evening a little bit as well.
Woke up Christmas morning and walked out the hooch, and one of the local Vietnamese was killing a dog with a hatchet for dinner for later. The dog was screeching. And that was an unfortunate start to the Christmas day. But the night before, I had because I was in base camp, it was rainy season, and I spent. Well, I was basically a base camp person anyway. I was a headquarters troop. And so I got a lot of the interesting duties that the junior first lieutenant in base typically gets. I was the officer of the guard of the perimeter on Christmas Eve and also for New Year's Eve of that year. And they were both official truce evenings, 24-hour truce. And for some reason, the person who had scheduled the uh, the staffing for that had put LRP troops who had come back into base on perimeter duty on Christmas Eve. I don't know why they would do that, but and they were pretty nervous in the service. And I spent all night getting messages from LRPs out on the perimeter that the gooks are in the wire, they're coming in. And I said, got to hold your fire unless they shoot at you. And I would notify division, and they would say, yes, that's right, they can't shoot unless they're shot at. So spent all of Christmas Eve and early that Christmas Day morning doing that.
Why would they have LRPs on guard, on perimeter guard?
I have no idea. I mean, I would figure they were coming back in to get some rest.
Exactly.
Get ready to go back out, but there they were.
Yeah.
Maybe they'd been stood down for a while. I didn't have any contact with the platoon that was associated with the squadron. But they were there, and they were not used to not shooting back.
Right. And then this dog, was it that the dog was being prepared to be lunch, or?
I think it was probably for Christmas dinner.
2 weeks before Christmas, we find out through word of mouth that the Bob Hope Christmas show is coming to town. And in the Bob Hope Christmas show is coming to the Da Nang PX. But we're not supposed to tell anyone, which made it all kind of, bizarre. So we're all deciding whether we want to go to the show. It's a day off for everyone. Sounds like a good deal, but we're all tired. We've only been back a week or two. And we know that we just came out of Elephant Valley. And that's exactly where they would use to mortar the Bob Hope Christmas show. And it was obvious that they could be there again. We didn't catch Doodly going through Elephant Valley, and chances are they were all back if they wanted to. But at the last minute, I decided to go and knew that getting there was going to be easy. Every military transport anywhere in Vietnam was heading to the Bob Hope Christmas show. So you got picked up, easily. And the vehicle, I was on a deuce and a half, sitting in the back, one of the last guys to climb aboard. And traffic just got backed up. We hadn't moved 2 inches in 10 minutes, and we were still like a mile and a half away. And I jumped out the back, and I decided I could walk faster than they could drive. And I got to the show, and it was packed. There must have been 100,000 people there. And the only place that I could sit was way up at the top of the amphitheater. So I was climbing up and trying to get a place to sit down. And that was the first part that really struck me as odd at the time. Is I was about halfway up the hill, and a Marine or a soldier would grab my sleeve and kind of try and pull me a little closer to the front, offer me his spot. And I had no idea why. And, okay, I'm getting a spot closer to the stage. And before I could sit down, somebody else just grabbed my arm and pulled me a little closer to their spot. And I was oblivion. I did not know why. Okay, so we sat there and we watched the show. And, it was the officers had their own chairs, little wooden chairs, all corralled in at the front. And the Red Cross Hospital had the war wounded kind of in a corral to the side. And everybody else was just up the amphitheater. And the show was good, okay, and we didn't get attacked. But as I stood up to leave when it was over, it was people were pointing to me, people were patting me on my back, and I really didn't. It took a while to understand what was going on, but it was probably the proudest moment in my life, in my entire life, because what was happening was these guys were offering their seats and acknowledging me as a grunt because I looked around. I was the only one, or very 80% of the people. I was in the 20% that carried a loaded weapon. And my utilities were too big and strung down. I was wearing a safari hat, a jungle hat instead of a utility cover. And my brass was not shined. And I sat there for a minute realizing that it wasn't for me. I never really felt I was a true grunt. I was in a grunt unit, but I was in H&S Company. You know, the grunts were in Fox Company, G Company, Hotel Company. The best feeling was the applause, the pats on the back. They weren't for me because the real grunts weren't here. The real grunts were sitting in holes so everyone else could be here.
I wound up with 2 tickets to the Bob Hope show and really was aware of the fact that Hope and his crew had been doing this since World War II. And I thought, oh, this is just a great opportunity. And then I started to think about my guys, and I gave the 2 tickets to 2 of my guys. And as they drove off in the company Jeep, I thought, oh, I wish that was me. But it was, I mean, it was the right thing to do. And so that's recollection number one. Recollection number two, Christmas Eve, I'm leading an ambush patrol out in the boonies. It is raining, it's hot, it's sticky. We're covered with bug juice. And behind us, off in the distance, at something like 9 p.m., our guys start popping hand pop flares, red and green, to celebrate Christmas. And I thought, this is the worst Christmas ever.
Christmas 1969, I was on a hill called 124, overlooking the Da Nang Trace, and it was cold and wet and nothing happened. We waited till we got back to our base camp before we had Christmas. My base camp roommate, he was up on Hill 119, which was the company observation post for Christmas. And as they do, the local villagers from Cham Song village, which was about 4 kilometers away, about 200 of them walked up to the hill in a Christmas celebration / protest. And the celebration was meant to get our attention and to set the scene for a discussion. The village elder was a woman who we call the one-armed woman. She had lost her arm fighting with the Viet Minh and worked her way up inside the Viet Cong infrastructure, the VCI. But on the South Vietnamese government side, she was also the village elder for that village. So she had a foot in both camps and worked both camps to the betterment of her village. And she led about 200 villagers up there with the banner painted. Actually, they had 3 banners, and they brought a cross, Christian cross, and planted the cross about halfway up the hill. Our corpsman went down with the security detail and held a medical call where anybody that was sick got treated.
I was in command of Barrier Reef, which is a canal that runs between, I believe, the Bossack and the Vamco Tay. And I was on a flagship. I was on the Benoit at that time. And I had troops out on the canal, and some of them stayed out there. They actually had little outposts out there and stayed out there. And the Benoit cooks were just fantastic. They prepared Christmas meals and arranged to have a helicopter take them out. And they all got a quart of eggnog too.
Wow.
And where they came up with this, I don't know, but several of them said later that they got sick on the eggnog because they drank it so fast and it was so good. But it was always appreciated. And at the reunions, that's one thing that people often bring up is how Thanksgiving, they did the same thing.